Our reading this morning is taken from John's Gospel, chapter 4, reading from verse 1. Jesus talks with a Samaritan woman. The Pharisees heard that Jesus was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John, although in fact it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. When the Lord learned of this, he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria, so he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about the 6th hour. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his flocks and herds?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give him will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." He told her, "Go, call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." Jesus declared, "Believe me, woman, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for they are the kind of worshipper the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in spirit and in truth." The woman said, "I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us." Then Jesus declared, "I, who speak to you, am he." Amen, and thanks be to God for this reading.
Good morning. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Tim Raynes. I am part of the team at King's across the road. I also work for Scripture Union Scotland and have the privilege of being involved in running the holiday club that we've had here for the past couple of years. And it's great to see some very familiar faces and to be amongst friends. Shameless plug, if you would like to be involved in the holiday club this coming summer, I would love that. We would love that. The dates are the 8th to the 12th of August, whether you could work with primary age children in this venue and we're also exploring working with teenagers in the evening. Please raise your hand if you'd like to. No, that's all right. But please, we would love to have you with us if you felt able to be. Please don't be too panicky as to, it was a long time ago since I worked with children or teenagers. That's great. We'd love you to be involved. I hope that you've enjoyed. Oh, you're still sat there. Are you all right? Oh, see, I'm sorry. I do apologise. I've just seen your crutch. I do apologise. So my name is Tim. As I say, it's a privilege to be with you, and I do trust that this series on growing young has been enjoyable. I understand you've got one final one to come, which David is doing, so we've obviously saved the best till last next week, and it falls to me to be exploring this subject called empathy with today's young people. How many of us would like to see the barn engaging more significantly with young people? How many of us would like to see this place that young people call this place home? Young people finding purpose, meaning, salvation, friendship, and ultimately Jesus here. There's a lot of hands. It's a good start. And I'm delighted that is the case. I knew it would be the case, but it's just so encouraging to be able to see. I want to read a little story from the piece of research for us. Liz read the passage from John's Gospel, but I'd just like to read these first couple of pages from the chapter that explores this subject. Pastor, if I raise my finger, will God know which one I'm going to raise even before I raise it? 13-year-old Steve attended church every week with his parents. This particular Sunday, he had stayed after the worship service to ask his pastor this pressing question. The pastor replied, "Yes, God knows everything." It's a bit like Jackanory, this, isn't it? I do apologise if I don't mean it to be Jackanory. Haunted by the plight of African children suffering from dire famine, Steve then pulled out a Life magazine cover depicting two children tormented by starvation. He asked the logical follow-up, well, does God know about this and what's going to happen to those kids? The pastor gave a similar response. Steve, I know you don't understand, but yes, God knows about that. If you were Steve, would you have been satisfied with the response? Steve wasn't. He walked out of his congregation that day and never again worshipped at a Christian church. The good, even remarkable news is that Steve was drawn like a magnet to the faith community, and his pastor specifically, for answers to the dilemmas that most troubled him. The bad, even tragic news is that his pastor's short-sighted response repelled him from the faith community permanently. Even more disheartening is that the pastor failed to grasp the question behind Steve's question. Similar to the young people in your congregation, our churches, Steve wasn't merely asking an existential question about the nature of suffering. Likely, behind Steve's rather esoteric inquiry about children in Africa was more personal questions about life and faith. Perhaps Steve wondered why God would allow the suffering he himself had experienced in his 13 years, which included bullying at school, financial struggles at home, and most painfully being relinquished for adoption by his birth parents. As Steve was trying to make sense of the pain in our world, he wanted his pastor to understand and help him make sense of his own pain. Maybe you've heard of Steve. His last name is Jobs. Steve Jobs, founder and chief exec of Apple, was a church-going teenager who wrestled with big questions. He sought out his church to help him pin down answers, but his congregation failed to understand what he was really asking. Imagine if he'd been greeted by a different answer, one that was on ramp to a deeper discussion about faith, rather than a conversational dead end. One that acknowledged his curiosity about suffering, as well as Steve's deeper questions about life goals, divine love, and his own place in the world. Imagine if the response had been, "That's a great question. How about if you, I, and your dad meet for breakfast this week and talk?" Or imagine if Steve's parents had been attentive enough to initiate a discussion with Steve themselves, or that any adult had hit the conversational ball back over the net to Steve instead of letting it slowly dribble off court. Imagine if Steve had had his questions taken seriously by his faith community, and he had later poured his entrepreneurial brilliance not only into furthering high-tech interfaces, but also into furthering the gospel and mobilizing others to respond to needs globally. Our world would be different today. A very simple story where a response, a cheap, easy response that seemed quite, I think Steve probably received as very patronizing, as opposed to, "Let's talk about that. I hear what you're saying. Let's talk." So, what is empathy? Can someone give me a definition of empathy? What would you say empathy was? Thank you very much. Being able to put yourself in another person's position. It feels with, it seeks to understand, it asks questions, it's trying to understand what life is like for you, for me. It's trying to hear and get beneath the skin of, placing ourselves into the shoes of others. It's not patronizing. It's not superficial. It's not sympathy. Sympathy feels bad for people. It's about getting alongside. And it certainly isn't judgment. There's an author that many of us may have read called Brené Brown, and she uses this expression that empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. So as you are empathetic towards me and my situation, I grow in my sense of connection with you. Because it's more than just a superficial, there's an understanding, there's a depth that we are going somewhere together, that I am being willing to allow, you're asking a question of me, I'm allowing that question to take place here and respond, and a deeper conversation occurs. And so if empathy fuels connection, we want to grow in our empathy. And I'm sure that as Barn Church members, you are strong in your empathy. We understand the importance of being empathetic towards each other. We appreciate when others seek to place themselves in our shoes. It's the looking under the bonnet of a young person. It's not just seeing the bonnet, but it's opening the bonnet and taking the time to explore what makes them tick, what's happening, where the world is, what it looks like, what it feels like. The world and culture of young people that they are swimming in. Culture is often perceived, there's some language around at the minute, that culture is about a pool, and that we can be affected by the currents within the pool. The sea might be a better analogy, but let's talk about the pool. That we can be affected by the currents and the movement of the water. And as church, I think for far too long, not the barn specifically, but the church has been viewed often as splashing around in the shallow end. Or maybe even worse still, tutting in our lifeguard capacity at the behaviour we see that we don't necessarily agree with. Maybe even blowing a whistle at the behaviour and calling it out and being a voice of challenge to that in our frustration at what we see. Instead, I'd suggest, in the same way that perhaps Jesus did with the Samaritan woman, he went on a journey, a conversational journey with that woman. We go on a conversational journey with young people that seeks to understand, seeks to explore, seeks to find out what is happening within their world and how they feel about it, what the connection is, and how I can empathise into that. It takes courage. What will I find? Their world might be very different to mine and my experiences, but I was a young person once, so surely I can relate. I've been there before, but it does take courage. These young people can feel a little different to me. And so the work we do with young people is how we understand young people. What's meaningful to them? What can we celebrate with them? What do they despair over? And how can I come alongside? How can I place myself in their place? There's a guy called Eugene Cho of Quest Church, I'm assuming it's an American church, who stated, empathy is the essence of what it means to care. It's the willingness to go to hard places with people. Even if people in my church disagree with me, I hope they know I care for them. It's caring. It's being alongside. So what is going on in the world of young people? Clearly, who's been a young person? There are a few hands that haven't gone up there. That's slightly concerning. We've all been young people at one stage. Some of us still are young people. Some age is just a number, surely, he says, having turned 50 this year. And and Kirsty's only 21 apparently, so she's definitely is a young person. But what is going on for young people today? I was a teenager in the 80s. This band, Duran Duran, were one of my favourite bands. But a lot has changed, just in fashion, let alone anything else from that time. And I would suggest, and this research would suggest, that we avoid 5 words in our work with young people. When I was your age. It's a no-no. It's patronising. It comes across, it's well-intentioned. I've used it myself with my children. When I was your age. And it just comes across as patronising. It comes across that we're naive. It comes across like we're trying too hard. But the research would suggest that churches that grow young not only not say that, but they go beyond it. They're wanting to understand. I want to show a short video that I hope will show something of what I'm seeking to communicate.
Discipleship was not a word that I heard growing up. No one said, oh, I disciple so-and-so. We just kind of did it. The Lord was pushing me to step out and essentially started learning the message of discipleship. Kind of felt like a burning bush experience where the Lord was like, it's time to start passing that on. So the next question is like, oh, well, great, to who?
My family had come to fellowship when I was in the 7th grade, and they put me in a youth group. And I didn't like youth group because I'm an old church. I was the only black kid in my youth group. I didn't want to feel singled out. I had the worst attitude. I didn't want to be there.
We were all in this tiny room, 4 middle school, high school girls, and I barely know any of them. I thought, all right, there could be a divine appointment in this room. So I'm just going to keep praying, and I'm going to wait. I'm going to let God speak. And I kid you not, there was one in the room who was like, not having anything artificial.
And she sat beside me, and I was like, who is this woman? Like, why is she here? Like, she's 20-something, and she keeps talking to us and wants to be like our Sunday school teacher, but it's not even Sunday school. But she, like, had this gentle, like, persistence about her that I didn't notice.
That night, I just started dreaming of this young girl. Sometimes we were going on walks, sometimes we were going on runs, sometimes we were sitting around at a table, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna ask her to coffee because 13-year-olds like coffee.
I was 13, 14, didn't drink coffee. I was like, I mean, I guess. I don't have nothing else to do. Are you gonna pick me up?
I knew it was an obedient move. I want to have it all together, but Lord, I don't know what's next. I'm sitting at coffee with a 13-year-old. I don't know what to say. He's like, just pursue an honest conversation. Just talk to her.
I remember she asked me a question about like someone's relationship in the youth group. I think they're gonna break up. And usually if I talk to an adult like that about another adult, the adult would say like, well, you don't know anything, like you're just a little girl, or like that's rude, how do you know? But she didn't say that to me. She kind of had a conversation with me about what I just said, and it wasn't a conversation of like correction, it was just a conversation between a person and a person. I mean, when you're 13 and you're in school and you have parents and everyone's older than you and telling you what to do, but then this one person comes into your life and like, here's what you say. Like, I'm really emotional, but that like melted my heart. And I think that gave like she could have said anything to me after that and I would have hurt her, so. I mean, she calls me her sister and we're sisters.
People are not projects. We started sitting down and meeting. We were for sure going to see each other on Sundays, but all of a sudden, a project didn't emerge. There wasn't this point where I go, okay, I'm discipling you and you're my disciple. It expanded what I really think that God meant for discipleship to be. This has been the one thing where I feel that I've been blessed in every way. She's a gift, she's a little sister. It's just meant the world to me.
See people as people. Don't come with all the answers and all the help, but have a conversation with someone and taking things slow and looking at people as if they're royalty, because they are. Treat people like people, like they're your friend, and actually mean it in your heart.
What strikes you about the video? Were there any phrases that stuck out to you? Treat people as people. Yeah. Treat a young person as a person, absolutely. Just have a conversation. Thank you, Andrew. Discipleship is not a project. Yeah. Absolutely. There were a number of expressions, weren't there, that both the older woman and the teenager used. That one person comes into your life and hears what you say. Doesn't dismiss it, hears it, and has a conversation. In that Steve Jobs thing, I like the idea of hitting the ball back, not letting the ball just dribble out of the court, but hitting the ball back, having a conversation, starting a conversation. Discipleship is not a project. Don't come with all the answers. It's so easy, isn't it? We've got so much knowledge as Christians. We know what we're talking about. We've been a Christian for so many years. I need to fill this young person with all that knowledge now. Allow space. Allow conversation. Allow them to speak. So, in mentioning I work for Scripture Union Scotland, there's an organisation we work quite closely with called Christian Values in Education. It's a Scottish-based charity, and they've recently done a piece of research. Are there any teachers in the room? Okay, thank you. The only reason I ask that is because we're going to look at an imaginary group of 24 Scottish young people. So imagine 24 children. For the two of you, that'd be very easy. 24 is a small class, after all. Very straightforward. But 24 faces in front of you. Currently, 4 have a probable mental health issue. 8 have additional support needs. 2 speak English as an additional language. 2 have been absent from school for an entire year. 3 show signs of problematic social media use. 5 feel lonely most or all of the time. 6 have experienced 2+ psychological problems this week. 3 have no means to access digital learning. 8 are living in relative poverty. 6 are in lone parent families. Their teacher is significantly stressed, trying to get it right for every child. That's the group of 24 young people. And in addition to that, our young people are trying to navigate culture that is moving so fast. This pool of currents is moving at a fast rate. Young people, we're all having to navigate that culture, but young people, I would suggest, are having to navigate it at an exceptionally fast and exceptionally young age. They're having to navigate a post-Christian, multi-faith, pick your own faith, a bit of this, bit of that, pick and mix faith. They're having to navigate the conversations of sexuality and gender, which is at the forefront of cultural narrative, where being straight, gay, or bisexual, that's the easiest part of the conversation. That's pretty simple. But our young people are engaging in culture where biological sex and gender, my maleness, your femaleness, is viewed as a social construct. And that increasingly young people are engaging in conversations with friends who will be identifying as agender, cisgender, bigender, gender fluid, non-binary, or gender queer, to name just a few. They're living in an increasingly tolerant culture. That's fine. Whatever makes you feel happy, whatever makes you feel good, that's great. Just you go on and do that. Don't enforce it on me. That's fine for you. And it's fine until someone says, this is truth. This is an absolute. I believe in this. And then suddenly there's zero tolerance. We live in a cancelled culture. So ultimately, we all live, and young people, because of their developmental stages, are growing with 3 ultimate questions. The 3 ultimate questions being, who am I? Where do I fit? What difference do I make? Who am I? Where do I fit? What difference do I make? And I guess for all of us, no matter how old we are, every now and then those questions infiltrate us. Maybe a significant birthday, maybe a time of change, maybe some insecurity happens or something happens, and some of these questions every now and then just raise in our mind. But for a young person, these questions are on a rolling boil. They're permanently there. So questions of identity, questions of belonging, and questions of purpose. Who am I? Identity. Where do I fit? Belonging. What difference do I make? Purpose. And I guess for all of us, but for young people, because of what is happening in and around them, we all seek to answer these questions. We all seek to find answers to these big, big questions. And so often, our young people, because of lack of experience, which is not their fault, it's just part of their growth stages, young people come up with false answers to these questions. And so the question of who am I? Young people can come with a response of shame and inadequacy as to who they are. I feel bad about myself. I try and cover it up. If I just do this, if I just do this, if I just manage this, if I just manage this, if I just manage to not allow someone into that bit of me, then who am I? Where do I fit? The sense of belonging. Conditional acceptance, which is temporary and short-lived. I'll like you if, I'll like you when, but if you stop that, then I won't like you. Seeking to try and find where do I fit by being chameleon-like to fit in with that which is around. And the question of what difference do I make, of purpose, of self-fulfillment. The answer is self-fulfillment. What makes them feel good? What makes me feel good? What makes you feel good? As long as you're happy, that's fine. That's the response. That's the culture. That's the nature that young people are working with. However, we know that the better story always wins. The story of Jesus trumps and can answer these questions so much stronger, so much better, so much fuller than some of the shallow responses that can be sought after. And so it is our role, I would suggest, to point people towards these, not glibly, not cheaply, but who am I? The answer, in grace. Because of grace, we can find who we are. Because of what Jesus has done, because of what God has done. We sang about it so beautifully earlier. Pours down on me, pours down on me. Because, the answer of who I am is found in the answer of grace. The question of where do I fit is found in a body that unconditionally loves and accepts, that smiles, that loves, that goes the extra mile, that invites out for coffee, that joins the family, welcomes in. And what difference do I make? The answer is mission. Inviting children and young people into God's mission, into an awareness of your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, and mission in its broadest sense, finding a place of usefulness in this loving, Christ-filled body, where grace is there, where love is there, and where opportunities for mission. And so, how do we potentially grow in this? How do we overcome those barriers? Because some of those sound all right. I understand that. It's grace, it's love, it's mission. But that sounds a fairly short conversation, Tim. How do we grow that discipleship like that woman and that teenager talked about? And some of the expressions that we looked at earlier in terms of discipleship is not a project. Some of the conversations about being heard, teenagers feeling they are heard. And so it starts in not judging, but in journeying. It starts by listening, by talking, by listening some more, understanding, asking a question, by journeying some more. That's great to hear. I'm really enjoying you talk about what you're passionate about. I don't understand it, but please help me understand that world of yours, whether that's music, whether that is how you feel about yourself, whether that is your devices, whatever it is, your passion for social justice, your passion for it against injustice, your passion. Let me into that. Ask questions, finding ways in. Don't judge, but journey. Coming alongside young people. I've just blurred the two there. Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more. Not just 3 words, but a posture. Tell me more. Let me hear a bit more. And I think as we looked at that story of Jesus in John's Gospel, Jesus didn't judge the woman. He journeyed with her. Now, she was in a very different starting point because there was a religious worldview that she had, and so he started at that point, but he journeyed with her. He didn't judge her. She'd had many husbands, but that wasn't the starting point. He journeyed with her in the conversation, and he invited more. Tell me more. And she batted the conversation backwards and forwards. And finally, and potentially most challengingly for all of us, it's about time. We all know relationships take time. We all know relationships with our spouses, with our neighbours, with our friends within church, our work colleagues, they take time. And so a relationship with a young person takes time. Jesus gave this woman time. And this is where it bites for us. Who are the young people that we know? Who are the young people within our church body, on the fringes of our church body? Young people that are connected to other people within this church body? Could I be bold enough? Could I have enough courage? I'd love to get to know you a bit more. Do you fancy coffee this week? I'd love to understand a bit more of what life is like for you. Kirsty, I'd love to hear about the pressures of your job at the moment. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Declan. Declan, I'd love to hear what it is you do, where you're at, what's going on for you. That's my biggest, we're on to a song. I know that's my biggest challenge. Where do I find time for that? And it is about grace, so I'm not laying one on us. But how do we find that? If this is a priority for us, if we want to see God move, it isn't just about, as that story indicated, yes, it was the pastor that got that response wrong. But we all know that church is about us. It's not about the pastor. It's not about the leader. It's about who we are as a body. Father, I want to thank you for the Barn Church and for this group of people here who are passionate for you and passionate for each other and passionate for young people. Father, we ask that you would help us. Bring to mind now, I ask for each of us, a young person that we could give some time to, developing a relationship with, developing a friendship with, doing that wisely with parents' engagement as necessary. But Father, bring them to mind. Give us courage to start a conversation and to listen, to place ourselves in their shoes.